Greetings and salutations. I'm the fallen angel Christopher Daniels.
This is NXT superstar Dexter Loomis.
This is the former intellectual savior of the masses, now known as Aaron Stevens, your NWA third-degree national champion.
Hey, this is Big Sexy Kevin Nash.
Yes, it is I, Big E, but more importantly, it is you, the people of YouTube.
You are watching Good Mic Work Commentaries, the work of a hard-working fellow by the name of Greg Morgan, 10-year veteran here on the YouTube scene.
You know, this guy who runs this YouTube channel is a 10-year YouTube vet.
I know you've been a fan for like 40 years. I've only been doing it for 30, so I guess we're fans together there for 10 of it.
This is Darby Allen, and you're watching the Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good Mic Work Commentaries.
Good Mic Work Commentary. Yeah, you better watch this channel. You better watch all the videos.
Check out Good Mic Work Commentaries on YouTube.
Check them out.
If you don't, we're gonna have a problem.
You're welcome.
Hey, what's up, guys? Good Mic Work Commentaries back at you with kind of a long overdue retro pay-per-view review. We've got a Patreon-sponsored one for you this month, courtesy of our friend Barry, very generous listener and supporter of the channel that's sponsored many videos throughout the years. I don't know how many this has been. I think it's way over 10. But Barry has suggested a doozy of a pay-per-view. We just passed the 10-year anniversary of the show just a couple of days ago, so I missed it by about half a week. TNA, Bound for Glory, 2010. This was a pretty big show in TNA's history, especially around 2010 during the Hogan and Bischoff era. And it's vastly pretty well remembered by the majority of the audience. Unfortunately, my TNA knowledge is pretty limited. I did eyeball the product a little bit back in the day, but this channel was kind of birthed on a lot of anti-TNA type of rhetoric and stuff when I first started. So aside from kind of hearing results, seeing YouTube clips over the years, and having a general understanding of the history of TNA, I've never really dug that deep into one of these pay-per-views from this time period. So this was an interesting one that Barry recommended, and it was the climax and culmination of about a year-long build to this whole 10-10-10 date and who the identity of they is. And unfortunately, since there is so much going on here storyline-wise with the climax of the main event and everything going on with Jeff Hardy, I didn't really have enough time to go back and watch all of the previous Impact shows and some of the ones following this event as well. So there's a lot of opinions and memories that I would really like to get from all of you guys, any of you who are really big TNA fans, especially back in the day around this time period. Fill in some of the blanks here for me as we go along, and right off the bat, I would love to have your comments in the comments section below, detailing all of your memories of the show, what you liked and disliked about it. And I'm really curious to see what your opinions were of Jeff Hardy in TNA around this time. I remember when he made his debut on that January 4th show, being a little bit disgusted with it. You know, he just left the WWE where they had given him chance after chance after chance, and even putting him in a very big world title program with CM Punk on his way out the door. And I felt like they kind of gave Jeff the world, and when he showed up on TNA, much like Ric Flair did on that very same show, I don't know, I was just kind of taken back by it a little bit. I just didn't, I guess I didn't appreciate it. But now looking back a decade later, none of this stuff matters anymore, and I can look at something like this with a fresh mindset, and it was really fun to look back at this pay-per-view, even though some of the details were quite confusing leading up to all of this with Bischoff and Sting and Nash. I tried to do my best to educate myself, even reached out to Barry for a couple of questions that I had about some of these storylines. So as we go through here and I go through the results, you guys can probably really fill in some of the blanks that are going on in my memory in terms of what all was going on here and maybe some of the little tidbits that I missed. So this should be a good one. I enjoyed watching the show, just judging it in a vacuum. I thought it had amazing wrestling pretty much from top to bottom here. And there were a couple of moments in the show that really surprised me. Some performances from people that was way better than I expected going into it. So I appreciated that for this show as well. I don't know where it ranks in terms of greatest TNA pay-per-views of all time. I don't think it's up there with the very, very best, but it seems to be, for the most part, pretty well remembered. As a matter of fact, on social media, the day of the 10-year anniversary, I saw more than one major Twitter account tweet about that show and the big angle that took place in the main event, which we'll get to later. So I think overall this show is pretty well remembered, and like I said, I pretty much enjoyed it as I watched it for the first time. I have seen bits and pieces of the show throughout the years, but have never really seen a match all the way through bell to bell until I watched the show just the other night. So we'll talk about it here, and I'll give you all my thoughts on it as best I can. And once again, Barry, thank you very much for your donation and your support. But anyway, TNA Bound for Glory 2010 went down on October 10th, 2010 from the Daytona Center in Daytona Beach, Florida. They have the attendance listed on Wikipedia for the show at about 3,500. It's a pretty small fan base there, but they were those audience sizes are sometimes the best because it's very concentrated. The fans were pretty much jacked for the show the whole time. It was a really good. I'm judging this because we're in the middle of the pandemic era right now, but it's just really good to see fans, reacting strongly to just about every match on the card. They certainly were not a boring audience by any stretch of the imagination. So they help. I think they helped a lot with the quality of the show. But the pay-per-view opens up with a really fun tag team title match. We got the champions, Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. They're taking on Generation Me, who of course were a very early version of the Young Bucks. I don't know. They might have been wrestling, about 5 years around this point. They were going by Max and Jeremy Buck back in the day, and they made some appearances here on random TNA pay-per-views and got multiple title shots in TNA back in the day. This was probably my first look at them. In my wrestling memory mind, I don't remember seeing the Young Bucks prior to 2010. So that was probably around the first time I ever laid eyes on this team. But it's pretty amazing now to see where they are now, their role on Dynamite being veterans, being 35 and 31 years old, as opposed to 25 and 21 years old way back 10 years ago. This match was good. Of course, you saw a lot of the early classic Young Buck moves really starting to come into existence here. I loved they had like Chris Sabin bridged over I think it was Nick's knees and then the middle rope, and then Matt just came off with like a great 450 splash, landed right on him. Brilliant spot. All sorts of great shit in this match. In the end, Motor City Machine Guns hit cool combination neck breaker, top rope cross body for the win. So, they were the much stronger team back in these days. This was a fun match and a great way to open a pay-per-view like this. Just a really well-executed, non-botchy, strong tag team match from top to bottom. So excellent job there and a great way to set the pace for what was a pretty exciting show all the way through. Even with the Knockouts match, which was up later, and I've never been really a big TNA Knockouts fan. Back in the day, most fans, I think, unanimously felt and agreed with the fact that TNA had a far better women's roster. I used to see that all the time. Right when I first started doing YouTube videos and stuff, I saw fans just trashing the Divas division, which they had every right to do, and really touting how good the Knockouts were and they could kick all the women in WWE's ass. And maybe around that time, they were right. When I look at this, looking back now, I think they had some good women on their roster here. But when you're also comparing it to modern times when they've just so vastly improved women's wrestling across the board, not only in WWE, but everywhere else is, getting stronger and stronger by the day, these Knockouts don't measure up at all compared to what we have now. But I think for this time, there was a pretty good amount of talent there, and two former WWE ladies were recently on the scene here, with Mickie James being the special guest referee in this match, and Tara, former Victoria, being a combatant in this. So this was going to be a TNA Knockouts 4 corners match for the Knockouts Championship between Tara, Angelina Love, Madison Rayne, and Velvet Sky. Now, Madison and Tara were kind of teaming up. Tara was showing up in previous weeks on TV in a motorcycle and like all leather outfit and a helmet and a mask, and you couldn't really tell who she was. I think if I was a fan watching this at the time, I would have immediately recognized that was Victoria. So I don't know how out of the bag the cat was around that time and how really truly shocking when she revealed herself. But she revealed herself to kind of be backing up Madison Rayne. They formed some sort of an alliance, Victoria being referred to as a bodyguard, but they're like making out in the ring and stuff. So they were going really extreme with the storylines back then, which was pretty fun. Now, this match seems to be designed to help, Madison Rayne get the title. She's expecting Victoria to help her win the title. But what winds up happening instead is they have a really kind of clunky, ugly, botchy finish here where Victoria... she rolls up Velvet Sky, and she's supposed to like have a handful of trunks but she doesn't have any trunk. She's kind of got her hand on her ass a little bit, and she's trying to hold her down, but it's just there's so much wiggling going on. It looks terrible. Mickie James counts the 3 anyway. Mike Tenay and Taz, who are your announcers for this thing, by the way, they allude to the fact that Tara had a big handful of trunks, but when they showed the replay, she had no trunks at all, but she still won the title. And immediately upon winning the title, she celebrates for about a half a second, and then it's like, oh shit, like, oh God, my friend is going to be kind of upset at this, which she was. Madison gets in the ring. She's very pissed off, and she gets in Tara's face and even shoves Mickie James down, who tries to come in and play peacemaker. Mickie gets shoved down. Mickie then nails Madison, and Tara leaves with the title, and Mickie leaves and smiles as Tara holds the new TNA Knockouts title. So women's wrestling in 2010 wasn't exactly setting the world on fire, but at least this match was a lot better than I expected it to be. Next up, we had Inc. Shannon Moore and Jesse Neal taking on the team of Eric Young and Orlando Jordan. Now, back at this time, Eric Young was doing the crazy gimmick. He did a pre-match promo backstage with Chrissy Hemme before the match, and he's got all these like drawn-on, shitty-looking tattoos, and they're kind of playing off the fact they're playing off of Orlando Jordan's sexuality and making all these puns and innuendos and things like that. And Eric Young refers to him being bi, and then he says polar or whatever. Then Orlando shows up, they talk a little bit, and then they head out to the ring for their tag team match. Now, Young is very eccentric in all of this. He even is walking around out there with a TNA rule book in his hand. During the match, we don't get very far into it, and he starts just randomly fighting Orlando Jordan, just starts taking him down with wrestling moves, and Taz and Tenay are laughing their asses off. They're not really even taking it seriously. They're almost finding it very comedic because Eric Young is completely out of his mind, and that allows Inc. to capitalize, hit their finisher onto Orlando Jordan for the win. So if you want to fill me in about how that storyline played out, and if it ever led to a match between the two, let me know, because I honestly don't remember and don't know. After that, we get an X Division championship match. This was good. Champion Jay Lethal taking on Doug Williams. Now, Doug Williams was, basically wrestling a little bit more of a wrestling and power style here, hitting Jay Lethal with all sorts of suplexes, but only being able to get a 2 count out of all of them. So in the end, match goes, I don't know, maybe about 13 minutes. Very good. In the end, Doug seems to say, like, fuck it, and he just goes up to the top rope to try a top rope Rana, which Jay Lethal counters kind of into a sunset flip and pins him, and retains the X Division Championship in a pretty damn good match. After the match, Jay Lethal is immediately attacked by Robbie E. I almost forgot about that stupid Robbie E. gimmick. This was 10 years ago, and he had Cookie with him, so this is obviously a play off of the Jersey Shore TV show. Of course, we see him now on NXT as Robert Stone, being just about as equally as obnoxious now as he was 10 years ago. And he put a beat down, I should say, on Jay Lethal, and insinuated that he wants a shot at the title. And I'm pretty sure he would beat him for it, either at the next pay-per-view or the one after, something like that. I know Robbie E. did get his hands on the title. And again, you guys can fill me in on the history there. This next one was brutal and violent. My God, RVD versus Abyss Monsters Ball match. This thing was set up over several weeks on TV. Abyss is another one of these wrestlers that keeps referring to the 10-10-10 date and talking about they. And there's some shady stuff going on with him and Hulk Hogan and their relationship. And his role in this whole thing is somewhat unknown, but is pretty much a big one. And leading up to this match, Abyss has that gigantic, board or piece of wood with nails sticking out of it. He calls it Janice. And he puts Janice into Rob Van Dam on a recent episode of TNA. And Rob is left all bloody and laying there. So this is going to kind of be revenge time for him. Van Dam is pissed. He demands this match. And it was every bit as brutal as we expected it to be. My God. And as soon as Janice made her appearance, it was going to get nuts. I mean, they did close-ups of that thing with those nails sticking out. And Abyss grabs it first. Rob Van Dam is able to fight him off and take control of Janice, and he grabs a hold of it, and he just hits a gnarly gut shot right to Abyss. I mean, right in the gut, and it just looks like he took it. He went down like a ton of bricks, and RVD immediately got up, hit him with a kick, hopped to the top rope, and hit a very quick 5-star frog splash on Abyss for the win and beat him pretty much in his own match. And after the match, Abyss is laying there all bloody, and he still keeps saying 10, 10, 10, and he continues to push that home. So that was all kind of leading up to the main event and what we would see there. The next match was a surprise, a delightful surprise. I really liked this, even though the storyline here is very convoluted to me because there's a lot to take in, there's a lot to digest, and there's a lot to rehash. But you've got a handicap match, 3-on-2 handicap match with Sting, the Pope, and Kevin Nash taking on Samoa Joe and Jeff Jarrett. Now, Sting and Nash have been adamant, apparently, throughout the entire year that Hogan and Bischoff have got some sort of a conspiracy to take down TNA. Sting even turned heel during the course of this, but still remaining firm that Hogan and Bischoff are up to no good. Nash believes him, and he's on this side too. And they keep saying, like, I'm telling you, they look like the bad guys, but they keep, insisting that some shady shit is going down with Hogan and Bischoff. What I loved the most about this match is how good Kevin Nash looked in it. Now, this was in October of 2010. By the time we would get to the summer of 2011, Kevin Nash would be in the WWE, and by then, when he had a couple of matches there, that one against Triple H, he was just so far past, what Kevin Nash or Diesel could do. But here in 2010, he did not look bad at all. Actually had some really strong, crisp moments in the match, and he just impressed the hell out of me. I love Kevin Nash. And, he went right at it, toe-to-toe with Joe at one point in the beginning of the match, too. He was, very tough, not backing down at all. And I thought he looked really good. Now, they do the deal here where Joe is getting worked over, and he's trying to make the hot tag to Jeff Jarrett. He finally gets over to the corner, and Jeff jumps off the apron, walks away, says bye-bye to Samoa Joe, leaving him in the ring all by himself. And Sting and Nash are like, I told you what was going on. So they were trying to warn Joe about this, apparently. And of course, nobody is believing Sting and Kevin Nash, but they're slowly but surely becoming to be proven right. And little by little, it's starting to show. So Jarrett walking away, Samoa Joe still doesn't back down. He jumps in there, starts brawling, but he's outnumbered 3-1. So they, the numbers game catches up to him there. They beat him down. Kevin Nash hits a power bomb, pretty big guy, Samoa Joe, and he's able to lift him up for a power bomb, puts him down, pins him for the win for his team. And, they kind of feel vindicated there because they're like, we told you there's some shady shit going on here. So that match was surprisingly good. I almost forgot how good the Pope was as well. I think WWE missed the ball on him terribly when he was there. And, wish he would have, kind of even done more, but just watching him in the ring there, I'm like, man, he is fucking good. Sting didn't even look half bad, back in these days. And of course, he would go on to win the title several months later. I think he would be in the ring opposite Jeff Hardy at Victory Road when Jeff had his little incident. So Sting was still kind of capable around this time, although he was very old. But overall, for a match to have that many kind of old-time legends, Sting, Nash, and Jarrett, it was still really good, really entertaining, and I thought it fed well into the ongoing storyline with the whole Bischoff and Hogan stuff. After that, we had a Mr. Anderson interview. He's apologizing to Kurt Angle and his family, I guess, for what he's going to have to do to him, I suppose. And he's very mad at Kurt Angle for punching him in the nuts, he says very loudly. And he says both nuts hurt, the right nut and the left nut. And I think it's Hemi that was interviewing him. She's like, oh, brother, or whatever, and they cut away. So Mr. Anderson, I was never a big Kennedy or Anderson fan, but he would do some things sometimes that would be entertaining, and he would say some funny things in promos from time to time, even though he really wasn't one of my favorites. He had me cracking up in this promo. Next up, we had a very cryptic promo by Team 3D. Bully Ray and Devon come out to the ring. And this is all Bully Ray here. He's the only one that really talks until the end, and he gets on the mic to talk about the legacy and the history of Team 3D and how they've been successful everywhere, and they're the most decorated team in history, and yada, yada, yada. He talks about how they made a commitment to each other all the way back in 1996 when they first teamed up to be the best, and that they are happy in TNA, and they're happy with their run there. But he says all good things must come to an end, and he officially announces that Team 3D will be retiring. He says, as of this moment, Team 3D is officially retired. However, they want one more match, and if Team 3D is going to have one more farewell match, there's only one team you should have it against, and that is against the best tag team in the world, which they believe is the current TNA tag team champions, the Motor City Machine Guns. So they retire, but also issue a championship challenge in the same promo. Kind of weird, but you knew something was up, because this, and you guys got to help me here, in the comments, this was probably around the time that Bully was going to turn heel, I'm guessing, right? Because I think they did the tag team match shortly after this, and that's where they did the heel turn, and then they would have some Devon and Bully matches down the road after this. So that's the way I think all this went down, but it was a way to start Bubba, or Bully on his heel run that would be, to me, somewhat successful. I enjoyed his heel runs in TNA when he won the title and everything, and was doing the stuff with Brooke Hogan, and, it kind of showed a different dimension and showed that he could, kind of make it on his own in a single. So I liked where it all led. This promo, though, was part of it was good, because Bully is a good talker, but part of it was kind of almost see-through and just weird and awkward. I didn't know what to make of it. So they kind of leave. They get all the love and everything from the fans. But I would think if I was watching this, I would have been suspicious right from the beginning based on the promo. I would have said, oh, he's probably going to turn heel or something weird's going to happen. There's more to this, than meets the eye, so to speak. Up next, we have a ridiculously violent match, a lethal lockdown match between Fortune and EV2. Now, Fortune was the crew that was headed up by Ric Flair, comprised of AJ Styles, Frankie Kazarian, Bobby Roode, James Storm, and Matt Morgan. And EV2 was the ECW crew, and they were being backed up by Mick Foley. And their team was Tommy Dreamer, Rhino, Sabu, Stevie Richards, and Raven. Now, Flair and Foley were really at each other's throats around this time. Flair was another guy that I was not too happy with in 2010. At the time, I kind of thought what he did was shitty with the way WWE gave him such the great send-off. Some say they might have forced him or kind of strong-armed him into retiring a little bit, but, he was still given one of the best and most beautiful and tear-jerking retirements, the best one we will ever see in professional wrestling, put in the Hall of Fame, treated like the mega legend that he is. And, less than 2 years later, he's taken a payday from the competition that's going head-to-head with him, with his former employer on Monday nights, showing up on their debut show. It's not like he did the Lex Luger thing. I think he even called Sean and talked to some people before he went and told him what he was going to do. But still, I just kind of thought he was an ingrate for that, and Ric Flair was always looking for a payday. He had every right to do it. It's not like he broke any laws. It's just, put a sour taste in my mouth. And then he wrestled. And that's the worst thing about it. And even WWE forgave him for that. But all that stuff, Shawn Michaels giving him that match of a lifetime at WrestleMania. And for him to take off the ring and take off the watch and all that symbolism on TNA and get back in the ring just for a payday. And when he got back in there, what did he do? Nothing. He was a mess there. He was just bleeding in every segment, bleeding in every match, and he even had a Falls Count Anywhere match, I think the week before, with Mick Foley, on Impact, which, both of those guys doing this to each other in that stage of their life. I don't know. You guys tell me. How did you feel about that? Was that an interesting angle? I remember the little bit that I watched of it back in the day, I thought was a little gross. I thought it was way too much for these legends to be doing that to themselves. And I didn't much like it, to be honest with you. At the time. But looking back at it here, again, I think they were trying to capitalize a little bit too late on that ECW crew that was still around, and some of them were still active. But even in 2007, 3 years prior to this, when they were doing it in WWE, I thought it was way too late, for guys like Sandman and Sabu and stuff to really be, credible contenders on the WWE stage. So now 3 years past that, they're in TNA kind of doing the same thing, touching on and trying to target that old school ECW audience, which a lot of those guys probably were into TNA around that time, was probably smart from a business perspective. But in terms of where all these guys were in their careers and stuff, doing this in 2010 didn't much interest me, even 10 years ago. But this match was awfully brutal, and I got to be honest, I know they've had lots of lethal lockdown matches in TNA before, but I'm not much a fan of this, because this was a 5-on-5 match. You got 10 guys in there, and it's kind of like the lethal lockdown is like TNA's version of War Games or Elimination Chamber, I suppose, because everybody's on the outside of the cage. You start with 2, and then the combatants enter in different intervals, and the match really doesn't even technically start until everybody's in. and that's where they put the top on the lethal lockdown cage, and the match starts just like the match beyond in War Games, and kind of like sort of like how they do in the Elimination Chamber as well. So it's kind of like their version of that. Now, much like a cage match or a Hell in a Cell match or an Elimination Chamber match, you must win by pin or submission. But the problem that I saw with this match is this is like a 5-on-5 hardcore anything goes bloody brawl. The cage handcuffs you in a way, because it's not like it's a Hell in a Cell where the cage, extends beyond the ring. This is all the way around the ring, and you got 10 guys in there. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to take breathers. You're just all right on stage like that. And in these big type of matches, you have to have a flow to where you kind of do one spot and then another, and the other guys kind of just sit back and do nothing while it's all going on. But a lot of times they can be on the outside of the ring or be hidden a little bit. So when it's like somebody else's turn to get their violent shit in, everybody just kind of has to stay mostly still or just sort of half-ass fight. And it didn't look very good. I just don't think it was a very good environment for these 10 guys to be in. It didn't give them enough room to play. And TNA uses a smaller ring. I think they use an 18x18, I think, and WWE's a 20x20. So even the match itself in the ring is smaller, and you're not even giving them the opportunity to really extend beyond the outside of the ring until the very end. Now, Fortune and Flair do a pre-match promo, which was pretty funny, especially to see Flair all fired up, and he's just doing his woo, and he's jumping around. He's got veins popping out of his head, so he's going nuts. Even when they make their way to the ring, both teams, Flair and Foley, immediately begin to brawl with each other, so they just hate each other's guts. But the match, until they really got to the finish here where they finally were able to get out of the cage, they had to start kind of one at a time. I think it kicked off with Stevie Richards and Kazarian, which is a good two guys to kick this thing off. We had AJ Styles in next, still sporting the short hair back then. And wow, AJ Styles, as good as he is now, imagine him 10 years younger. He was so good back then. In 2010. We had Tommy Dreamer in next, followed by Bobby Roode. Then we get Sabu, a bald Sabu who had recently finally parted ways with his hair. Smart move. Followed by James Storm. After that, we got Raven, and then Matt Morgan, and the final member for EV2 would be Rhino in last. So right off the bat here, you got Tommy Dreamer bleeding hard. As a matter of fact, I think every member of EV2 was busted open, and there might have only been one in Fortune. And like I said, this is where it started getting a little bit tough to watch for me when they were all in there, and it just felt like it was stalling, and everybody's kind of bleeding, and it's just not exciting because there's nowhere to go. I actually just did not like this match concept. It should have been a Falls Count Anywhere, or it should have been, a bigger, make the cage bigger and come up with a different fucking name for it and kind of make it like a Hell in the Cell-ish type of match. Just give them room to play. There's no room to play with any toys here because they were all confined into this tiny little fucking space. So finally, the match starts, the top comes down, so they can't even really escape through the top either. But Kazarian gets thrown through the door. So they've got that big door, very similar to what you see in the Elimination Chamber. Kaz gets thrown through it. Door gives way. He's on the outside of the ring now, and Stevie Richards goes out after him, kind of chasing him around. So Kaz is running around the outside of the ring. He winds up climbing up the cage. Stevie Richards follows him up there. On the top of the cage, they've got a chair and they've got a table. And there's what appears to be some sort of big wadded up cloth on the side, which you don't really notice at first. So these two guys are lucky they didn't die. Kaz, he gets Stevie, I believe, on the table, which is on top of the cage. And then he's got a ladder up there as well. So then he starts to climb up on the ladder to essentially, I guess, do a table bump onto Stevie, but they're also so high up on the top of the cage. And then from out of nowhere, underneath that tarp, out comes Brian Kendrick. He was hiding under there the whole time. Kaz is up on the ladder. Brian Kendrick pushes it off, and another extremely scary bump. My God, go back and watch this and just watch the way everybody falls. They're lucky nobody died here. They all stay up there. Brian Kendrick was kind of doing his spiritual gimmick or whatever the hell was going on back then. I kind of thought the Kendrick stuff was going to be the finish there, but then I remembered you can't pin the guy on top of the cage. But since now that the door had given way, a lot of other members of Fortune and EV2 had spilled out as well, leaving Tommy Dreamer in the ring alone with AJ Styles, and he's able to hit like a middle rope Dream Valley driver onto AJ and pins him for the win for his team. So EV2, the ECW Originals, were able to wipe out Fortune in a finish that kind of surprised me. Now, I guess based on what was going on in the storyline at the time, that finish probably made sense. But I think the resumes and the talent was, I don't know, maybe a little bit stronger on the other side, considering like Dreamer and Sabu, weren't really, full-time roster members. And, you got guys like, Rude and AJ on the other side. I just thought Fortune was the stronger team, and they fell to the ECW originals, and a lot of references to ECW. Don't forget you had Taz on commentary for this, so he was kind of doing his best to be unbiased. They did do some pre-match vignettes on television at the ECW arena, like outside the arena, where they're talking about their history there and stuff. So they're really tapping in to what was left of that hardcore ECW audience that hadn't completely abandoned and given up hope on wrestling and life altogether after what WWE did to the ECW brand in the resurrection and the way they completely murdered it. So maybe this was a way to kind of try to bring it back to life and, give some respect back to the ECW originals because of everything WWE did to ruin it. I don't know if that was accomplished here or not, but it looks like they had a good little run there, and it was fun to even see Mick Foley involved in that, even though I think he was doing things that he shouldn't be doing. You think about how he is now in 2010. The dude can barely move around or walk. Just a mere 10 years ago, he's taken hardcore table bumps and all that stuff. He just did that the week before, like I said, in the match with Ric Flair, off the stage, through a table, onto the concrete. Just crazy bumps in 2010. What are you doing, Mick Foley? So, I don't know, looking back on this, from my perspective, I'm not sure if this was one of my favorite elements of TNA, seeing Ric Flair and Mick Foley at the stage of their career doing these things to each other. It's not something I really needed, but that's just me. But let me know what you guys think, please, in the comments below, because I'm really curious to maybe learn more about this time period and see if anything can convince me to maybe watch more of it, or even maybe do another review. We'll see. But that leaves us with the main event. The TNA title was vacated. And to be honest, I don't even know why it was vacated. I think Rob Van Dam was champion most recently, and then he wasn't. They did a long tournament on TV to determine the new champion or whatever, or the number one contender. And I guess there was a time limit draw, I think in an Angle and Hardy match or something like that, and then Mr. Anderson won his match. So instead of doing the finals here for the title, it turned into a triple threat, and you had Kurt Angle taking on Jeff Hardy, taking on Mr. Anderson for the TNA title. There was also a stipulation here that Kurt Angle would retire if he didn't win the title here, which is one of the things I had to ask Barry. I'm like, how did they get out of this? Which we'll talk about later. But this was still, we had still had the 10-10-10 stuff advertised, for a year. Here we are in the main event. We haven't seen any big revelation all night long, so you probably knew going into this that whatever they were going to do was going to take place in this match. Now, the match was pretty good. I mean, this are three guys that were recently all, kind of in WWE. And when you look at wrestling today, there is a portion of the fan base that claims and likes to poke fun at AEW for being all WWE rejects. I don't think it was as bad as TNA, man, especially when you look at a main event like this with Angle, Hardy, and Anderson. And Hardy had just gotten there less than, a year prior to this. He was battling CM Punk for the World Heavyweight title on SmackDown. So, here he is battling Angle, another, WWE guy. He'd been TNA for quite some time now. And Anderson, who had recently come over after, he was let go because of Randy Orton in that LA Lakers match or whatever they had. So one thing I did notice about Anderson in this, he looked kind of out of shape compared to the other two. He was very pale and pasty looking, and he just didn't look very good to me. I thought he was supposed to be like this badass, kind of Stone Cold Steve Austin type. Physically, he didn't look very good in the match to me, but the match was still okay. Kurt Angle around this time was pretty close to top form, just doing some amazing things in there. And Jeff is too. Jeff was, pretty hot stuff there in the WWE around 2008 and 2009. So that was carrying over here into TNA, but he also had some other problems on top of that. But the match goes on for a while. We wind up seeing a ref bump by Brian Hebner. Brian and Earl were both recently in TNA around this time as well. And the referee goes down, and that's when Bischoff comes out with a chair. Now, Bischoff, I believe, around this time was playing the babyface role, and he comes out, or maybe he turned heel, I forgot. He was babyface for a while during all this shit, that's for sure. So Bischoff comes out, and you know that whatever they're going to do here, it's gonna happen now. So he comes out with a chair. He gets in the ring for some reason. And then Hogan, who isn't even supposed to be there, Hogan's music hits. He recently had surgery. And he comes out on crutches, struggling his ass off to get down the ramp and into the ring. He's got security kind of escorting him, helping him gingerly get in the ring, and he can barely even get through the ropes. And I'm watching this. I'm like, what the hell? Is he really this bad off? Is TNA really that desperate to have him on TV that they would bring him out here in this condition? And he then kind of has a standoff with Bischoff with the crutches. I think Bischoff even gets his hands on one of them or something. They're kind of, threatening each other, and Jeff Hardy kind of gets in between them to be the peacemaker. And that's when Hogan hands him the crutch, and he's like, just lay out Bischoff with it. So Hardy then has the crutch, and he's looking at Bischoff, and he's waiting to hit him. And instead, he turns around and wallops Kurt Angle with the crutch. That's the big swerve. Jeff Hardy turning heel, aligning himself with Bischoff and Hogan, just like Sting and Kevin Nash tried to warn everybody about. Hogan and Bischoff have got this big shit-eating, I told you so grin on their face as Jeff Hardy, all there's really left to do now that Angle is taken out is hit the twist of fate on Mr. Anderson and pin him and become the new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. So in a year's time, just a little bit over a year's time, he was WWE Champion and TNA Champion, all within a year. Pretty big accomplishment here for Jeff Hardy as well, because, he's now in this major angle with Hulk Hogan. Jeff Hardy and Hulk Hogan, being in the same storyline to me is just weird if you think about, the Monday Night Wars and, the Attitude Era and stuff. I can't believe those two guys would come anywhere near each other. And here they are basically handing the keys to the store to Jeff Hardy, making him the centerpiece of, was it Immortal? Is that what they wound up calling the faction or the big group that they would start? And they basically laughed that they had everybody fooled. And Jeff Jarrett then comes out. He, of course, walked out on Samoa Joe earlier on. So he comes out to join the group. And, of course, so does Abyss, who's recently developed a relationship with Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan gives him a hug and welcomes him. And then Rob Van Dam, the ballsy son of a bitch that he is, he shows up, gets in the ring, kind of gets in Jeff Hardy's face, like, what are you doing, man? What the hell's going on here? And then he just gets attacked by all of the members of Hogan's crew, gets laid out, and Jeff Hardy hits him with the belt. So Jeff celebrates with Hogan and Bischoff and his whole crew there. Bischoff is, or Jarrett is laughing his ass off. I think they even have a sign referencing the they stuff. And so they turned out to be they. It turned out to be exactly what Nash and Sting was warning everybody about. And I think the following night on Impact, they would have a big segment here where Nash and Sting would confront them and confront Jeff Hardy and all of that shit. And Jeff made a great heel, I think, back then. He did a pretty good job with that. And I think it was about a month later, a couple of weeks later, they would unveil the new Jeff Hardy custom TNA title, which looked terrible. Not my favorite championship belt. It looked like the Divas title. It was purple and it was feminine-ish looking. It just didn't look right. It didn't look like a championship belt. But I suppose there's been worse in WWE. Definitely, I'd take Jeff Hardy's belt over the spinner belt for sure in a second. So maybe it's not that bad, but I still think they should have just kept the title the way it is. But he wouldn't even hold that for very long. Sting would win it, and then Jeff would have his issues, and he'd be gone. So that was kind of a short-lived championship anyway. But it is one thing I do remember about this angle is Jeff debuting that new title. Or I think it's Hogan that kind of presented it to him on TV a few weeks later. But, in terms of this angle and the storyline, I think it was good for Jeff, to be involved in an angle with Hogan and Bischoff and everything, but it was also kind of a strange pairing. Like, was this their plan all along? As soon as they started hyping this they crap or the 10-10-10 stuff, is that when they decided it was going to be Jeff that was going to be the big heel turn? Or did they just say, somebody's going to have to turn, there's going to have to be a major turn of some kind, heel or babyface, when all of this is paid off? And they just kind of waited to see how it went until they got there. I don't know what kind of evidence was shown on TV prior to this with Jeff Hardy. Did he do anything that made the fans a little bit suspicious that this could happen? I don't know. So that's where you guys come in. Come in the comments below and educate Good Mike Work on what the hell was going on back then with all of this, because I'm curious about how some of it played out. But looking at some of the pay-per-view results down the line, you can kind of see what happens there. with Hardy and Sting and everything. But there's still a lot about the angle and stuff that I don't know. But if I were watching it at the time, I'm curious just how shocked I would have been. Like, because I already knew what happened, of course it wasn't that shocking to me, but like looking at it for the first time, did it shock you? Did you know something like that was going to happen? And if somebody had to turn and join Hogan and Bischoff, was Hardy the most logical choice? Or did you think it was somebody like Anderson or possibly even Kurt Angle? Maybe that whole thing was a big swerve. And instead, it turned out to be Jeff Hardy, and he was kind of the centerpiece and the figurehead and the champion of the group there for a little while. And it was a pretty historic night, I suppose, in TNA's history. Like I said, a lot of people comment fondly on this show, and I saw a lot of positive memories about it on social media the other day when we passed the 10-year anniversary. So I'm curious to hear what all you guys had to say. I thought this show was very good. Going back and watching TNA pay-per-views now, I think are going to be much easier for me to do because I have no reason to be biased towards them or judge them unfairly. I can look at these shows and judge the wrestling for what it was, and I think this show had some really strong points. I think it opened up amazingly with a really fun tag team match, something very similar that we would see on Dynamite today. The knockouts, I wasn't expecting much out of that Four Corners match, and it wasn't that bad. And Tara, was still in pretty good form back then, so it was cool to see her win the title. Was kind of indifferent about the Inc. and Jordan and Young match. Lethal and Doug Williams, I did enjoy very, very much. RVD and Abyss, another match that was brutal and I enjoyed, but there was, and Barry helped me, was it Unbreakable? I did a few years back, or a couple of years ago, the review for you, and I think it was Abyss and Sabu. I think I liked that match a little better than Abyss and RVD, but this was still a very good Monsters Ball match. Like I said, Kevin Nash really impressed me in the six-man match, and I forgot, that he could still sort of go even back then. Quad jokes or no quad jokes, the guy has always kept himself in amazing shape, and Kevin Nash is like one of my favorite people ever. So just really good to see him perform well, and he'd be heading off to WWE shortly after that. The only maybe low spots of the night, I wasn't that thrilled or that into the Dudleys or Team 3D's promo because he knew something was kind of up there and the whole thing was a little bit awkward. And I wasn't a huge fan of the Lethal Lockdown match. I thought handcuffing 10 guys inside of a very small space really limits what they can do and really takes away from the violent nature of it, and it kind of looks slow and almost like just a lethargic type of lazy type of feel instead of really high intensity, really high energy like hardcore and violent matches should be, with the adrenaline flowing. It didn't look like there was any room for any adrenaline to flow because most of the guys were just sitting their ass on the mat the whole time. So, for matches like that, if you're going to have an anything goes match involving ECW guys, do not confine them anywhere. Let them go and do whatever they want because that's when magic will happen. So I didn't much like that match either, but the main event finished strong. I thought it was a good triple threat, and the swerve with Jeff Hardy, turning heel, winning the title, aligning himself with Hogan and Bischoff, I thought was pretty good. And a great shot of Dixie at the end. She's kind of in the front row, like just shocked and stunned as hell. And I know, Dixie had some warnings from Sting and stuff on TV prior to this too. So she was kind of dumbfounded as to all of those unfoldings there, and it was pretty good. Now, I was very critical of TNA around this time because I thought that they had deviated so far from their identity, and I thought what really made them stand out and why they had such a strong fan base to begin with is that they finally, after quite a while, they finally offered a legitimate alternative to WWE, because when they first started, they were doing the weekly pay-per-view thing. They hadn't developed that strong of a fan base yet. They really weren't considered competition to WWE. But when they started really gaining some steam and they became really popular in the UK and they had money behind them, they were well-funded, and they had enough money to bring in some top-name talent to mix in with their kind of TNA homegrown talent, in the days of like 2006 when they picked up Kurt Angle and got a couple of other guys, that's when I thought they were really at their strongest. Even Christian coming in, for a short time and being there as well. A couple WWE guys sprinkled in, I thought helped the roster. What they didn't want to do was make the entire roster full of former WWE guys, and that's what they were doing. They were literally signing everybody. And then in 2009, late 2009, when the announcement was made that Hogan and Bischoff were coming in, as executives or, creative people in the company, you knew they were fucked right off the bat. They were going to be on TV. They were going to be a big part of every storyline. And next thing you know, you were going to see Hall and Nash and X-Pac and everybody on TNA, Ric Flair, Jeff Hardy, and the entire company almost overnight became former WWE guys. And I thought that was a big mistake. And they tried to go head-to-head with them on Monday. And instead of being your alternative, different, action-packed, six-sided ring type of show that offered the fans something different than typical WWE, you decide to go head-to-head with WWE with a product exactly like WWE. That is a recipe for failure, and they didn't come anywhere close to competing with Monday Night Raw. And they had to wave the right flag and jump the fuck off that Monday night time slot really quick. Where now, look at where we are in 2020. I swear you move Dynamite to Raw to Mondays, it ain't beating Raw, but it's putting a hurting on their ratings. I mean, if Raw's drawing an average of 1.6s right now, you put them up against AEW, they're probably going to be 1.1, And AEW is probably going to draw 500,000. Yeah, they're still losing to Raw, but not by much. Where back in the day, TNA was getting their asses kicked by Raw, 2-3 times the rating sometimes, not anywhere close to really competing with them, and it wasn't long before they said, all right, we got to get out of here, and they moved. So I personally look back at this time period in TNA not very positively, because I thought they were making a big mistake around this time. But, based on everything that I've read and I've seen from everybody regarding this show, a lot of people liked it. So let me know your pros and cons of TNA in 2010. What was the best year in TNA? That's another question I have for you. Would you put it somewhere around like prior to Kurt Angle coming in or after, 2004, 5, 6, or 7? Part of me thinks it would be somewhere in there for most fans. But let me know, what was the best time period in TNA, and when, in your opinion, did they jump the shark? Was it with Hogan and Bischoff? Because to me, that was the death nail right there. Once they came in, that was it. I was like, there's no way. This company's doomed. Not because they will just immediately kill it, and I'm not going to put all the blame on Hogan and Bischoff. I'm going to put the blame on TNA for not dancing with what brung them. The reason they got over and the reason they developed a fan base is because they were different. Now you are consciously going out of your way to be the same as WWE and to get away from that alternative feel of a product that you gave us, and it hurt them and it cost them a very big price. They've nearly gone out of business several times, but they keep surviving, and Impact has kind of turned the corner yet again, and they still are capable of providing some really good wrestling even here as we sit in 2020, and they're coming up on a 20-year anniversary of their company's existence. So, props to them for, hanging around as crazy as things have been for them and how things have not gone well since 2010. They've managed to not totally die, and I think there's something to be said for that. So if I'm going to grade this show, I'm going B-. B-. Like I said, they lost a couple of points with me with the Lethal Lockdown match. Not my favorite match. And a couple of things here or there. But overall, if I'm just looking for good, entertaining wrestling, mixed in with some good wrestling, violence, and comedy, this was a really good, well-rounded wrestling pay-per-view, in my opinion. So, well done, TNA. You didn't bore me to sleep. I thought you had a pretty good show here. And there you have it. So like I said, let me know. Hit me with all your opinions, your memories, any facts that I got wrong, or any things and elements about the story that you want to add to what I've talked about, and maybe fill in some of the history here before and after. Feel free. Have at it. Give me a complete history lesson in the comments below. I swear I will read it. You guys take care. Thank you again for hanging out with us this afternoon. And Barry, thank you one more time for your very generous donation. I appreciate it. I hope I did a good job on this review for you, and hope to do many more in the future. So you guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.